All right, Doc. What else we got?
Next question today is from someone refers to him or herself as D. It says, "Hi Dave, thanks for the opportunity. I'd like to ask the doc if the optimal or target free testosterone range is the same if one is on exogenous testosterone, let's say 300 milligrams a week test a cycle, or different compared to the healthy high youthful levels of free testosterone. There is conflicting information on the web, more often than not pointing out that since free T from esters doesn't fluctuate during the day, the same free T number from esters gives you more bang per buck than free T numbers on blood panels taken when you are using your own production." He's making reference to some studies here. Looking at a few studies seem to prove this, but I'd like to hear the doc's opinion. He's pointing to study one, and again, maybe we can put this on the website. I don't know, post facto, but it says shows guys on 300 milligrams a week of tests and anthate having 13.8 plus or minus 2.1 nanograms per deciliter free T and gained an average 5.2 plus or minus 0.8 kilograms of fat-free mass in 20 weeks without training, when healthy range is for males 35 to 40 years, 4.65 to 18.1 nanograms per deciliter. Okay, I'm not going to read through the rest of this because he references another study, but I don't think this is in keeping with the question. First of all, I think the question is more or less about the number, meaning either total testosterone versus free testosterone in someone who's using exogenous testosterone versus one's own endogenous production. Mm-hmm. That's comparing apples and oranges for more than one reason. First of all, while bioidentical hormone replacement testosterone approximates real endogenous, if you will, testosterone, it's not the same. I liken it to the same hand but without fingerprints, bioidentical testosterone, so that it does fit in the glove, but it's not yours. I also believe, and I'm saying this carefully because I don't believe we've got studies showing it out there. This has just been my experience, and they're, for the record, just my theory, that I should say it's just my theory. I've said this before, and it's been known since the 1950s. In order to get, excuse me, sorry, we might have to edit this a little bit.
You're good.
In order to get clinical benefit from replacement therapy, you're going to have to see a number of serum testosterone, total testosterone, of about 800 nanograms per deciliter. And again, we've known that number since about the 1950s. That's a really healthy total testosterone for a 20-year-old, anybody. So it sets the bar a little higher. Why? The rest of this part, now from here, is just sort of my theory, if you will, from looking at this over the years. It takes more to get more as you get older. We see that in nature a lot, whether it's because the receptors have downregulated perhaps, or the receptors just don't work as well as they used to, or other factors like the epigenetics of it all just doesn't operate with the source code, the genes, like it's supposed to, and we don't make as much of the RNA. I mean, there's all kinds of reasons why something that used to take us farther before doesn't take us as far now. So, you need a little bit more to get farther. So I think that's most of what we see here. But to look back at his question, you're going to need more replacement testosterone, in my experience, to get the same amount of result, if you will, from endogenous production. So that 800 nanograms per deciliter to use total testosterone, and we really should be talking about free testosterone. The exogenous testosterone required to get to that number will not do as much as the endogenous production will to get to that number. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Let's see if there's, as for the rest of it, he makes references to those on aromasin versus, again, without going into the study, I don't think this one applies to what I just said in the question as much as what I said. So let me just leave it at that, unless there's something else in that question you think
I think that was the gist
of
the question. Yeah, you want to know. Awesome. All right, Doc.
Next one is from a 17-year-old gentleman with gynecomastia. He writes, "Dear Dr. Rand, I'm a 17-year-old with gynecomastia. I got it about a year ago, 1 month after I started working out and eating well. I got my testosterone levels checked and they were slightly above the normal range of the hospital. On top of that, I had a slightly above normal hematocrit, hemoglobin, and red blood cell count. Is it possible I'm getting the side effects of steroids, Gyno, and high red blood cell count while being natural? I don't take any testosterone supplements. And if so, what can I do? Thanks." Absolutely right on the mark. Gynecomastia is very common in teens. And to see a fluctuating usually, but higher than normal testosterone is normal to see often enough. And as a result, what happens is your body likes this homeostatic range. And if you go above that range with certain individuals, and usually, anyone, or most people, I guess I should say, you'll see the body convert some of that, what it considers excess testosterone, into estrogen. That's where we get our estrogen from, the aromatization of testosterone. So this happens in teens, and you get gynecomastia. I think the term we used to use in this country anyway, and maybe it was just in the South, but corkscrew nipples or something like that, because you get these masses, and they form underneath the nipple. It's tissue, breast tissue, that's created from exposure to estrogen. And it creates these nodules, if you will, underneath the tissue. And it's, look, I guess I should approach this from another direction, since this is a 17-year-old, a teenager. Again, reminding everybody this is common. There's nothing wrong with you per se, but you could argue that you're actually ahead of the game because you've got a good, healthy endocrine system that's pumping out lots of testosterone, and apparently enough that you're producing slightly above normal levels of hematocrit, hemoglobin, and red blood cells, although that might be a stretch because you might be what we call dry, meaning you were dehydrated when you took this, and so your hemoglobin levels and red blood cell count and hematocrit might seem a little higher than it normally would. Again, now I might be reaching a little bit, but we do know, my point being, that certainly low levels of testosterone can create anemia, which is a decreased or below normal level of hemoglobin, hematocrit, and red blood cell count. And excess testosterone, can create the reverse, where you have above normal levels of hemoglobin, hematocrit, and red blood cells just being normal, meaning no other changes to that. But of course, if you add to that oxygen deprivation through exercise, going into what we call hypoxia, getting on your bicycle and riding uphill for a couple hours in what we would say, I guess, oxygen debt is the common term. That creates a leverage on your body to create more hemoglobin, hematocrit, and red blood cells, right? Because your body says, hey, if you're not going to breathe any faster than you're already breathing, we got to do something about this oxygen carrying capacity. And so it makes these, and so, and the other way this can be elevated, again, to be rare in a 17-year-old, unless, if you have a big neck or you have some sort of blockage in the windpipe around the trachea, if you're snoring, in other words, you could be overweight, and that can cause issues. The category we lump all this into is sleep apnea, where you're not getting enough oxygen, as though you were riding your bike uphill for 6 hours or 8 hours during the day. You're doing it at night by not breathing well enough, not getting enough oxygen. That could elevate those numbers, but I don't think that's this gentleman's main concern so much as it would be mine anyway, is the cosmetic issue of the gynecomastia. These, by the way, are, as I said earlier, quite normal and don't typically reflect, I'm thinking of, it's not a tumor, it's not cancerous, right? And it might go away on its own. Sometimes these things require surgery to get rid of the tissue. Sometimes they shrink down on their own. One thing you might ask the doc is whether or not you can use something to block the conversion, like we would with replacement therapy, to use an aromatase inhibitor or just a blocker, a receptor blocker, so that you don't grow any more tissue as a result of the excess estrogen.
Gotcha. Cool. Thanks, Doc.